So we finally made it back to our YV adventure, Installment 2. It took us a long time to get back here, much longer than I thought, but we are here. Hey everybody. Well, we have some unfinished business in Merced. I thought we were done here, and actually technically we are done in Merced. However, there's a little bit of a sidebar thing I'd like to share with you. I meant to do it in the last video, Installment 1. However, kind of forgot about it, again, because it's a little bit of a sidebar. And I thought, yeah, let's cover it. It's important. And it has to do with the Santa Fe, the ATSF, the Santa Fe Railroad. I've already kind of shown you guys how the SP was involved with the YV, in that the SP station was the westernmost terminus of the YV. The YV, of course, had its own station down there on our street. But there was also an agreement with the Santa Fe Rail. And the Santa Fe Rail had throughout its, as far as I understand it, throughout its passenger service network of rails, they had what they call the Harvey House. The Harvey House, I'll go into that in a moment, what that is. However, we did have a Harvey House here in Merced. So right where the YV crossed the ATSF, it had a spur that basically paralleled the Santa Fe tracks alongside the Harvey House. So I'll take you there. So that's the little sidebar. We'll take care of that. And then we get back to the YV story itself. And the YV and the ATSF both had spurs that went to the Yosemite Portland Cement Company. And I mentioned that briefly in Installment 1. We're going to go to the Yosemite Portland Cement Plant site today, and I'll show you what remains there. Not that there's a whole lot, but I'll at least show you what's there. And the Yosemite Portland Cement Company, that was a huge customer of the YV. I know they shut down their operation here in Merced about 1944, maybe 45. Anyway, once the Yosemite Portland Cement Company shut down, that pretty much was the final nail in the coffin, as we say, of the YV, because they were a major revenue supplier. So when that plant shut down, the YV was already suffering and financially, and that was kind of the end of the story for not just for the Yosemite Portland Cement Company, but also for the YV. But the Santa Fe Rail and Yosemite both had spurs into that plant. So again, we'll cover that right before we leave town, and let's see how the story goes. What's curious is this very ornate home here is very close to where the YV had their original station, the original terminal, before they built the permanent one on our street. Alright, so we're going to turn left on Canal, and the original YV station would have been down, you see the tracks, the Santa Fe tracks in front of us. The original YV station would have been down that way, as well as the Harvey House, which of course now is long gone, because it was right on the corner of the railroad tracks. And you can see the YV station down there. The Harvey House would have been just to the right. So the history of the Harvey House, I'll give you the very brief version, at least as I remember it. The Harvey Houses were basically, they started out as dining rooms or restaurants that were built along the Santa Fe Railroad. I guess we have to remember that in those days there were no dining cars on the railroad, and restaurants along the way were pretty much non-existent, or one of the words I read, that the ones that did exist were basically deplorable. Those are the words of the author, not mine. So Harvey Houses were created by a gentleman by the last name of Harvey, imagine that, as about every 100 miles along the Santa Fe Railway, they would have a restaurant, and I guess these were quite nice. So nice, in fact, that I guess you were expected to actually wear a coat to come in and dine. And so that's how our Harvey house wound up here in Merced, right alongside the Santa Fe tracks. And one day they would even incorporate hotel rooms or lodging, overnight lodging. The Harvey house in Merced, it's no longer here, but when that was demolished too, I don't know. I haven't found that information yet, but let's get out of town, or at least attempt to. All right, so let's kind of regroup here real quick. So this is the SP station. It's also the Greyhound bus station, as you'll see, right off of 16th and 16th, and this is O Street right here. So the YV came in behind the SP station right here. Came out after O Street. It came up paralleled 16th and continued on to R Street. And right here is where, let me get back in here. And came up to R Street right here. So basically it crossed 16th right about this point, went across the parking lot here. And here's Main Street. So the old YV station was right here on the corner of Main and R, right in this little corner. And then stayed on the north side, or north or west side of R Street, and continued, basically the west side of R Street, and continued north. And the rail yards would have been here, which today is the school, all the school grounds that we showed you. And Installment 1. And then continued north. The YV continued north all the way to Bear Creek. And basically this was, as we've talked about before, this is kind of where city limits ended right here. Merced back on that day did not cross Bear Creek. But it did cross the Santa Fe rail track. Santa Fe, Atkins, let's call it the ATSF. It did cross the Santa Fe tracks right in this area here. And again, we're staying on the left side or the northwest side of our street. And now we're at, this should be Farron's Park. And what I want to show you, I am leading up to something, really I am. So here's the dog park where we kind of wrapped up things in Installment 1. So here's the dog park, here's the bike path, and this is Farron's Creek that flows through here. As you can see on the sign or on the phone here. Well, just north of here, the tracks there was a spur. The main line continued north out of town, but there would have been a spur that would have turned left and gone due west or straight towards Highway 59. And that would have taken us out to, and again, none of this development was back then, was there back at the time. Yeah, right here, West Yosemite Avenue. So again, the dog park where we're at before is here, and you can see we're parked there now. We would have continued west, or I won't say due west, but in a westerly direction to 59. Right here on the corner is where the Yosemite Portland Cement Company was located. And we're going to go there now. And you'll see there's hardly anything left, but we'll try and get some video and maybe a few photos of what's still there. And unfortunately, this is about as close as we're going to get, but this is the final piece remaining of the old Portland Cement Company, which the YV had a spur running to. And they would actually pick up the raw materials up in the Merced River Canyon near Yosemite National Park, bring them down here and process them. The Santa Fe Rail also had a spur that ran to the Portland Cement Company. We'll head out on Highway 59 and see if we can get a different angle on this. It's all on private property now, so I'm probably not going to be trespassing out there, as tempting as it might be. And the original plant, I'm going to close that window, I'm getting like a percussion going on here. The original plant basically ran along this area right here. In fact, you can see some of the lumber there, hopefully. And the plant ran all the way down here. And the spur came off from that direction. All right, last installment, we were out at the end of that tree line right there. And we're looking across at this development right here in front of us, which was built right over the top of the YV roadbed. So we're going to go out this way, and if memory serves, we will find what remains of the YV. Merced has roundabouts. How about that? So the YV rails would have more or less paralleled right where we're headed now. Let's see what we can find out here. Yeah, I think this is it. I think we found it. I think we found it. Right in this field over here. In fact, if you look across, you can kind of see the grade there. Let's get a little closer. Yep, that's it right there. Headed straight out of town. Basically due north, or what would be considered westbound on the railroad. And this is that housing development that we talked about. Between us and Farron's Park. And the doggy park. And you can kind of see the grade there off on the other side of that field. Headed straight out of town. Let's see what's down the road. And more of it there. But as you can see, like in so many parts of Merced these days, there's a whole lot of development going on. So what does remain out there will not remain much longer. Again, sign of the times. Now somewhere along this point, there would have been a spur which would have gone off to the left here, off to our left, which would have been more or less west. And that's going to take us over to the Yosemite Portland Cement Company. And it would have been, looking at the map, it would have been right about here, right through here somewhere. So who knows, we see some grades out there. Who knows if that grading is from farming activity, maybe the new development, or perhaps there's one of those is still the grade from the old spur that went off, again, towards Yosemite Portland Cement Company. There are parts of the YV roadbed in Merced you just can't get to on the ground. They're restricted. They're on private property. They're on farmland. So that being the case, I thought I'd put Louie up in there, see what we could find out here. You can see the old roadbed just beneath us. This is kind of cool. This looks like this maybe hasn't been touched since the rails were pulled up in 1945. So this is a very cool section right here. Now we're coming up on a section that has all but been erased because of new development. And just beyond that new development, right beneath us, I'll put an arrow up there real quick. There's one short section remaining right before we get to that development we drove behind earlier in the video. And Farron's Park way off in the distance at the top of the frame. So we're driving through a new development. This would have been nothing but open fields. I don't even think it was, looking at photos back in those days, this wasn't even tilled. This wasn't even farmland. It was just open land. The YV staff, the engineers, brakemen, they wouldn't even recognize this today. So we're coming up to Bellevue Road, and what I want to try and do, if traffic allows, is show you where the YV crossed Bellevue. Let's see how this goes. Alright, I don't know if that shows it or not. There's a little rise in the road, and that is the YV. Goes off to the right and the left. There it is, back towards Merced. Alright, so we are on Highway 59. Actually, this is J59. No, Highway 59, that's right. It turns to J59 up here in Snelling. And we have two pieces of railroad history that coincided here. The one on the left, which the camera may not pick it up, there's barely any remnants of. This is of the Southern Pacific Oakdale to Merced spur, and that's off to the left there. If you see that rise in the rise in the earth right there. In fact, here's an even better shot of it. That is the old Southern Pacific Oakdale to Merced spur, and this ran. I apologize. I forget how early this operated, but I believe it was 11. I do remember it shut down in the early 50s. I want to say 1952. And so you had this, the Southern Pacific spur, and just directly ahead in that tree line, that is where the YV roadbed came out from behind what is today the landfill. And I've not seen any history indicating that whether that was or was not a landfill back in the day of the YV. But as you can see here, they came very, very close together. In fact, the only thing separating these two railroads, SP on the left, YV on the right, is this little strip of road, which today is Highway 59. There's the YV, and there's the SP. And I couldn't resist this one. On the left there is the roadbed, barely noticeable through the grass, but earlier I mentioned the SP Southern Pacific spur between Oakdale and Merced. You can kind of see a little bit of a cut there, but it would have been right along this road in the early 90s. There you go. There's a good piece of it right there. Right there. And from what I've read, back in the early 1900s, when this would have been active, this road we're on here, Oakdale Road, was very, very busy because this actually predates Highway 99, which goes through the Central Valley. We are in the small community of Amsterdam. There's the old Amsterdam store. Long closed, but originally opened in the early 1900s. At the time that this highway was a main thoroughfare through the agricultural end of the Central Valley. There's a lot of homeless activity along this bridge anymore, so I'm not going to be going too deep into this. 1912, which coincidentally is the same year the Titanic sank, just to kind of put things in perspective. God, that sounds kind of twisted. I'm just really making this negative, huh? Pretty serene, actually, if it weren't for all the traffic ripping by on the newer Merced River Bridge. So where that bridge is located now, that would have been where the SP spur would have crossed the Merced River down through here. Basically, it paralleled the road bridge that we're on here. And the way the bridge was constructed back then was it would have been built up on lumber. Basically, it was constructed of lumber, and it would have spanned all the way across the river. And if you can see that hillside over there through the trusses here on the bridge, that hillside goes all the way across. There's kind of a home off in the center of the frame. There's a home up on that bluff. The bridge would have ended roughly over there, so it's about 1.25 miles long. And from what I understand is it stood all the way until 1950, early 50s, mid 50s, and it all burned down. But at that time, this spur had been abandoned anyway. And I remember as a kid actually swimming in the Merced River here off of a rope swing tied to the side of this bridge. It's a little different atmosphere around here now. Sad, actually, very sad. This place is pretty torn up. And it is tore up, but I will say that when I was there last time recording this video, it had been cleaned up. It was looking better, definitely looking better. Although there's still a whole lot of traffic, and definitely much more than what I remember when I was growing up in this area. And it is unfortunate that so much of what was here when I was growing up is now gone. But at least we still have the bridge, which again, this was the vehicle bridge, which again was built in 1912, and I can't remember exactly what year it was, but they closed it to vehicle traffic in the early 2000s when the new bridge was built. And I know this is a little sidebar excursion that really has not much, if anything, to do with the YV, but I think it is interesting that this particular branch of the Southern Pacific, which basically ran from Oakdale to Merced, it operated from 1890 until 1942, which means that the two railroads paralleled each other, as I showed you earlier, along 59, both of them serving Merced. And for about 40 years, they both ran right alongside each other on each side of Highway 59. And the other thing I find fascinating about this particular branch is how it actually predates Highway 99 and I-5 through the Central Valley, and it served primarily passengers wanting to move what they called through the inland branch from Oakdale to Merced, meaning it was inland of the Central Valley, and also it served farmers all through this area. So kind of a reflection of the time. And it's interesting to think about the timeline. This branch was actually predates the Shaffer Bridge by 20 years. And so after leaving Stockton, this thing would stop in the little, now small communities. Probably were still small back in the day, but would pass through Oakdale, Waterford, Hickman, Montpelier, and here at the Merced River, actually the stop was actually called Basil. And from Basil, it would head on to Arundel, which I'll show you that in a moment on our aerial video. And what I thought was kind of an interesting little piece is Merced residents would actually use during the warmer months of the year, would actually use the rail to take them from Merced to the Merced River. And from there, they'd spend the day at the river and then head back into town that evening. I remember way back in the day, there was actually a tavern out here, which would have been just on the north side of where the rail crossed the Merced River. So I think it's time we wrap up this little sidebar excursion, and let's get back out to the YV. Where are we at? Oh, 59. Yeah, Highway 59. Here we are, Edendale Creek. Oh man, more traffic. Edendale Creek, the YV timesheets, I think they said this was about 10.9 miles. How do you like that? 10.9 miles out of Merced, or at least from the R Street station. And just beyond that grade right there, that rise, that takes us back to the landfill. And more or less southeast towards Merced. The headwaters, if you want to call them that, are just up the hill there. And beyond that is a canal operated by the Merced Irrigation District, and that organization will come into play later in the story. And the water flows down Edendale Creek out of the canal down into the valley below. At one time, probably up until about 10 years ago maybe, there was a wooden bridge went right across this section here. And then just a little bit north of here, along the roadbed, there was a siding where they basically could pull two trains side by side. I guess that didn't stay in operation that long. And this was once a quiet county road, and as you've heard a few times already, it's now a very, very busy state highway. But at least we still have some evidence of the old YV. here at Edendale. All right, so now we're going to go a few miles down the road and get to the Canal Creek Bridge. All right, just a few miles, a little farther north, or roughly about mile 13. We're here at the Canal Street Bridge, or yeah, Canal Creek Bridge, that is. And as you can tell by the height of the old roadbed there, this was definitely a bridge with some substance to it. Had a little bit of length and a little bit of height as we listen to yet even more traffic go by. It's kind of hard to imagine now. This used to be just a very quiet old county road. Not so much anymore. And we're looking kind of southeast back towards Merced again. There's Highway 59 without any cars on it. Imagine that. Looks like this one toppled maybe not so long ago. If you look just to the right of that footing, that concrete doesn't look that weathered. Not that I'm a concrete expert. And it looks like this one, at least part of it's been repurposed. That's good thinking right there. Okay, so now moving on to the Merced River. Just another mile or so down the road. Through the trees here, you can see this built-up area right here. Let me get a little closer. I want to show you this. Here we go. Now you can see it. The big mound there, that would have been the west side approach of the bridge that went across the Merced River. The bridge, of course, is gone, but how it worked was you had the spans that went across right through here. Now, quite a few years ago, you could still see some of the A-frames out there in the middle of the river. Long gone. They went through and did like an environmental review and cleaned out a lot of the old structures that were down in here. And when they did, they took that little piece of history with them. We made it to the river. We didn't get across, but we made it to the river. Which makes me wonder why I ever thought that we would be in Snelling on the other side of the river by the end of Installment 1. There's just so much good content, you know? That's got to be what it is. And I don't know where to stop. I just keep getting more and more information. Too many distractions. But we're wrapping up Installment 2 here at the edge of the river. It's literally like right there. So Installment 3, we'll definitely get across the river and we'll make it to Snelling. And once again, I went really, really long in this video. I got to work on that. It must just be great content, right? That has to be it. Yeah, we'll say it is.